So welcome to China Forum and Guancha.cn and the Beijing Winter Olympics. Did you attend the opening last night?
Yes, a very spectacular opening. I must say, I haven't seen such light effects like I saw. Very spectacular.
Yeah, it was quite a show. So Prime Minister Khan, you're not an ordinary world leader. You entered politics as an outsider. And it's especially relevant today during the Olympics because you were an athlete. So would you share with our viewers your personal journey from athlete to Prime Minister?
Well, Dr. Eric, I played international sports for 2 decades, almost 21 years. And it's one of the longest playing careers of an international athlete. When I left my sport, normally athletes stay in the sport for the rest of their lives. Because if you reach a certain status in sport, in other words, if you become a world class or someone who's performed very well during his sporting career, then the rest of your life you have the easy way to commentate on it, be in the media, do whatever, coach. So all these avenues are open for you. But when I left my sport, I never wanted to go back to it because I always feel that the human potential God has given us, all of us, enormous potential. But that potential only you can achieve if you keep challenging yourself. The moment you stop challenging yourself, there's no such thing as a plateau in life. Either you're going up, and the moment the challenge goes, you go down. So this is how the Almighty has made us human beings. So I always wanted to leave the sport after I'd finished because it was an easy life and I didn't want to stay in that life. So I first built this cancer hospital after I left sport because there was no cancer hospital in Pakistan, and it was the biggest charitable institution in the country too. It still is, and I have built now a second cancer hospital from donations. And I'm in the process of building a third one. And I built 2 universities, and all of these are charitable. They are not commercial. They are basically for people who can't afford quality university education. Most people can't afford cancer treatment. So these are more or less 75% free in the hospital treatment, cancer, and 90% of the people in the universities get free education. So that was the way I was headed. And then I decided to go into politics because I realized that our country was being destroyed by crooked politicians. My belief is that countries are poor only because of corruption. And corruption is a symptom of not having rule of law. And by rule of law, I mean that a country that cannot bring the powerful crooks under the law, they become banana republics, they become poor countries. And that's why I came into politics. My manifesto was based on 2 principles. One was rule of law, and second was to make Pakistan a welfare state. That's why I came into politics 25 years ago. And I struggled for 22 years before I finally got into office.
Yes, that's what an inspiring story. So, Prime Minister, my first serious question is about Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a neighbor of both Pakistan and China. How do you see the situation there evolve in the near future? What should be the role of China in helping stabilize the country, if any? And also, many in the United States have blamed Pakistan's support for the Taliban in America's failure in Afghanistan. What would be your take on that accusation?
Well, firstly, the Americans did not study the history of Afghanistan. There is a saying that those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it again. So anyone who understood the history of Afghanistan would never have done what the Americans did. And I was the one who from day one kept saying that the Americans would militarily they will not succeed in Afghanistan. First of all, they were never clear on what they were trying to achieve in Afghanistan. Was it nation building? Was it democracy? Was it liberating the Afghan women? They had no clear aims. If anything, once Osama bin Laden was killed by the Americans, their mission should have been over, because theoretically they only came to fight Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda was decimated in Afghanistan in the first 2 years. So what they were doing after that, none of the Americans themselves knew what they were doing there. So when you have no clear aims of why you've invaded a country, it was always going to be a failure. And secondly, they don't understand the Afghan character. The people of Afghanistan do not accept foreigners in their country ruling them. They do not accept control from outside. They are one of the most independent-minded people. So anyone who thinks who can control the people of Afghanistan or occupy them, they haven't read their history. So I used to keep saying throughout 20 years that there was not going to be a military solution, because I know the history of Afghanistan. My ancestors came to India from Afghanistan. So, and I read the history. So unfortunately, no one understood, because the generals believed in their firepower and they thought, you know, they were invincible. But if a people do not want to be ruled, you cannot rule them. If a people do not accept a foreign invader, he will always find it difficult to control them for long. So number one, the whole mission of the US was based on false premise and had no clear goals, and it was never going to succeed. Now what has happened is that after 40 years, actually there is no conflict in Afghanistan anymore. There is no civil war going on. There's no fighting in Afghanistan. But the problem that Afghanistan faces is that in the US, somehow they cannot distinguish between the Taliban government and the 40 million people of Afghanistan. And the danger is that in trying to punish by sanctioning the government, the Taliban government, they will end up, there is a huge humanitarian crisis unfolding in Afghanistan. And this is what should be avoided. I have raised my voice on every forum. If Afghanistan descends into chaos because of the sanctions, because already, even when the Americans were there, half of the population was below the poverty line. So when a country that its budget depended 75% on foreign aid, when you cut off the aid and then sanction the country, this could be the biggest man-made humanitarian crisis. So what China, Pakistan, the neighbors, the Europeans, everyone what they must do is convince the Americans that this is not the way to go about dealing with Afghanistan. Because in the end, if there's chaos in Afghanistan, the reason why the Americans first landed in Afghanistan was because of terrorism. So if there's chaos in Afghanistan and the Taliban government gets weaker, it will not be able to take on international terrorists like ISIL.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So Pakistan and China, of course, have enjoyed perhaps one of the most durable partnerships in international relations. And this relationship is deepening in a more turbulent world, especially in the two countries' cooperation with the Belt and Road Initiative. The Gwadar port, for instance, is becoming a strategic project. Now, many in the West view it with suspicion. There have also been fear of opposition against it within Pakistan. So how do you see it, and what can the two countries do to foster a more mutually beneficial relationship that also contributes to the region?
Well, I do not understand why there is this suspicion about CPEC and the Gwadar port. It makes no sense, because as far as Pakistan is concerned, and let me tell you as the Prime Minister, my number one priority is the 220 million people of Pakistan.
Yes.
About over almost 25 to 30% of our population is below the poverty line. And Pakistan has really, especially in the past 30 years, we have really gone down because of these two families taking turns to loot the country. And of course, then joining the US war on terror, which was a disaster for Pakistan. Pakistan should never have participated in the war. You know, while the US lost 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in the entire 20 years since 9/11, Pakistan lost 80,000 people. And we had over $100 billion lost to the economy. So our top priority right now is to look after our people. And our whole emphasis, my government's emphasis, is on geoeconomics. We want to build our economy now and to lift our people out of poverty, taking a cue from China. What China achieved is really what we look towards China as a role model, because never has any nation taken so many people out of poverty in such a short space of time as did China. So this is really my main concern, that how do I lift people out of poverty? How do I create wealth in my country? And we see CPEC and Gwadar as a great opportunity for our geoeconomics. And I think this is not exclusively just between Pakistan and China. We invite any other country to come and join in and invest in CPEC projects.
Yes, indeed, the economic opportunities are great going forward. So now I want to talk about India a little bit. So China and India have had a difficult period of tension in the past 2 years. It has somewhat stabilized in recent months. So how do you see this tension in the next few years from Pakistan's perspective?
See, Dr. Eric, I know India better than probably most Pakistanis. And that was because of cricket, because cricket is a religion almost in both the countries. It is the most, people are fanatical about watching cricket. So being a cricketer, I used to play there a lot, and I got a lot of love and respect in India. And I probably know India and Indians better than most Pakistanis. When my government came into power, my first priority was to normalize our relationship with India. And we have only one issue with India, and that is the Kashmir, where India is denying the people of Kashmir the right of self-determination, which was guaranteed by United Nations Security Council resolutions. And unfortunately, India has been denying them that right. And it's a disputed territory between Pakistan and India, acknowledged by the UN. But unfortunately, and I say very unfortunately, because I think it already is, and in future it will hurt the people of India much more than, say, even Pakistan or China. So what is happening in India is this government, which only thinks that India belongs to Hindus. And in doing so, it is basically marginalizing something like 600-700 million human beings who are now considered second-class citizens, including the 200 million Muslims in India. So it is a terrible situation for India. And I must say, as someone who knows India, I think it's a great tragedy that has happened to India. And that's why India is having problems from within, and it is having problems with its neighbors. We just hope that better sense prevails there, because as things are going, I think India is going to damage itself much more than anyone else.
Oh, this certainly sounds concerning. So, Prime Minister, how do you see Pakistan's relationship with the United States in the next several years? With its failures in both Iraq and Afghanistan and many internal problems, the US seems to have lost much of the hegemonic power it acquired at the end of the Cold War. Are we moving towards a more multipolar world order? And how do you see the rivalry between China and the US in this new global situation? And where would you place Pakistan in this new situation?
Dr. Eric, look, anyone who's a student of history like I'm sure you are, I certainly am. There is no such thing as, any one nation staying on top forever. It just doesn't happen. All nations go through the same, they go through a period of real self-belief and hard work, and they're motivated, and they just forge ahead of other nations. But there always comes a time when that nation relaxes, it loses that motivation, and then some other nation comes up. This is a human history. The last thing the world wants is another Cold War. And I say this with a lot of fear. The sad trend, unfortunate trend of this rivalry between the US and China. If this could easily turn into healthy competition, and in that the whole world gains from it. But if it goes into a Cold War type situation, like we witnessed, after the Second World War between the Soviets and the US, I think the world does not want another Cold War. And for Pakistan, again, I repeat, my concentration is only on one thing: how to look after the 220 million Pakistanis. Half of them are not in a good place, who are hovering on the above poverty line, and half of them below. I mean, the bottom 50% is hovering on the poverty line. So my main concentration is how do we look after our people? How do we provide them their basic necessities? How do we bring rule of law in my country? And the last thing we want is any sort of conflict. So Pakistan, and to answer your question, I see Pakistan's role as maybe one day replicating the role Pakistan played in 1970 when it brought China and the United States together, when Dr. Kissinger made his famous visit to China. I see our role again, us playing that similar role, rather than, getting caught up in these rival blocs. I think the world will suffer because of this, if it happens.
Yes, indeed. I think China certainly is not looking for a new Cold War. I have a sensitive question for you, Prime Minister. The United States and Europe have accused China of genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Now, as the leader of a major Muslim country and a country that shares a border with China and geographically close to Xinjiang, what do you see from your perspective?
Dr. Eric, we especially asked our ambassador in China, Moin al-Haq, to go and have a look in Xinjiang and find out what is actually going on. And the report he gave to us was completely different to what is coming out on the Western media. According to him, there is more development taking place. The emphasis on development in Xinjiang is unprecedented. He did mention that there were terrorist attacks by ETIM, and therefore, because of that, there is a certain security issue. But, the sort of things we were told don't exist in Xinjiang and against the Uyghurs.
Well, that's a lot of information. Well, thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. So my last question, we all know Pakistan has been a great and close friend of China's for many, many years. We call you Batie, as you know, and we all wish Pakistan well. So please tell us, what is your long-term vision for your country?
Dr. Eric, let me say first of all that, United States has been also a good friend of Pakistan. But it hasn't been a sort of, like with China, an all-weather friend. There have been times when the US has been very friendly, but then, when they think Pakistan is not of use to them, then we get abandoned, and then they again sort of become friendly. For instance, Pakistan became a frontline state against the Soviets in Afghanistan, so Pakistan became a friend of US, and sort of they even helped us and they were good to us. But the moment the Soviets left, they they slapped sanctions on Pakistan. But then 10 years later, when again 9/11 happened, they again became very good to us. But then when they could not win in Afghanistan, then we were blamed for this debacle, what took place in Afghanistan. So with US, it's not really been what it has been with China, an all-weather friend. China, for 70 years, our relationship, it has been consistent. Pakistan has at every possible forum stood with China. And China, whenever Pakistan has needed China, China has stood with us. And so it's gone deep into our public. It's a peoples to people thing now. It doesn't matter whether Imran Khan is in power or someone else is in power. Whoever comes to power in Pakistan will always have a very close friendship with China because it's a people-to-people friendship.
Yes, of course. I think we feel the same here. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for your time. It's been a great honor. And I think you'll reach a lot of Chinese audience. And thank you very much for being at the Olympics and show your great support for this amazing event.
Thank you, Dr. Eric.